When I first walked into the company's lobby, I had nothing but a wrinkled shirt, a resume printed at the public library, and hope that barely outweighed my fear. My shoes were worn, my confidence even more so. Every face that passed me looked sharper, more successful, as if they belonged in a world I could never reach. I was just another desperate young man in a city that chewed people up and spat them out. But that morning, something, or rather someone, changed the course of my life forever. I was sitting in the waiting area, rehearsing what I'd say in the interview, when a tall man with graying hair walked past. His suit wasn't flashy, but the way people moved aside for him told me he was important. He glanced at me, not the quick, dismissive glance I was used to, but a pause, a study, like he was seeing something others didn't. "You're here for the junior assistant role?" he asked. My throat tightened. "Yes, sir," I managed. He nodded slowly, then surprised me. "Follow me." No explanation. Just the kind of authority that didn't need one. He led me into his office, a space so polished it felt like stepping into another universe. "Tell me," he said, leaning back in his chair, "why should we hire you? And don't give me the usual answers." My rehearsed lines evaporated. I told him the truth, that I didn't have much experience, that I'd made mistakes, but that no one would work harder than me if given the chance. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just studied me for a long, silent moment. Then he said 4 words that altered my fate. "You start on Monday." I didn't know then that those words were the first domino in a chain leading to the unthinkable, the day I would sit in his chair. My first day was chaos. Phones ringing, papers shuffling, people speaking in a language I barely understood, the language of business. My desk was small, wedged in a corner near the copier, but to me, it felt like a throne. I was in. I belonged, or at least I told myself that. In truth, I was terrified of making a mistake big enough to send me back to where I'd started, nowhere. Mr. Collins, the man who had hired me, didn't coddle. He didn't stop to check in, didn't handhold. But I caught him watching me now and then, as if silently measuring whether his gamble had been worth it. I made it my mission to prove it was. I arrived earlier than anyone, stayed later than everyone, and when the office emptied for lunch, I stayed at my desk, learning the filing system, answering calls, or reading contracts I didn't fully understand just to absorb the rhythm of it all. Weeks passed. Then one night, long after most had gone home, I was organizing invoices when I heard a voice behind me. "You're still here?" It was Mr. Collins. I froze, unsure if I was about to be reprimanded. "Yes, sir. I just wanted to get ahead." He glanced at the neatly stacked files and nodded. "Keep doing that," he said simply, before disappearing into the elevator. That night, something shifted. It wasn't just a job anymore, it was a proving ground. Opportunities often arrived disguised as problems. For me, it happened on a rainy Thursday when the office buzzed with panic. A critical presentation was due the next morning, but the junior manager in charge had fallen ill. No one else had the time or knowledge to prepare it. I'd read enough company reports during my lunch breaks to know the material. My hands trembled as I stood and walked to Mr. Collins' office. "Sir, I think I can handle the presentation." He raised an eyebrow. "You?" His tone wasn't mocking, just cautious. I nodded. That night, I stayed until the cleaning crew had vacuumed every corner. I pieced together charts, data points, and narratives like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. By morning, I was exhausted but ready. The boardroom was intimidating, filled with sharp-eyed executives. When it was my turn, I spoke slowly at first, then with growing confidence. I didn't just present numbers, I told a story. When I finished, silence filled the room until Mr. Collins said, "Well done." 2 words, but they felt bigger than any paycheck. From that day, I noticed a subtle shift. People who barely acknowledged me before now asked for my input. Mr. Collins began inviting me into meetings I had no official reason to attend. I sat quietly, taking notes, absorbing strategies, watching how deals were made and how silence could be as powerful as words. Late one evening, Mr. Collins asked me to walk with him to his car. "You've got potential," he said without looking at me. "Don't waste it." That sentence became my personal commandment. I started arriving before dawn, studying industry trends, teaching myself skills no one asked me to learn. Every small success built into the next, but so did the challenges. Not everyone liked my sudden visibility. Whispers began that I was Collins' pet project, that I'd skipped the line. I ignored them, but deep down, I knew that proving myself once wouldn't be enough. In this place, you had to keep proving yourself every single day. The real test came during a high-stakes negotiation with an overseas client. The lead negotiator, a seasoned executive, fell ill mid-flight, and our deal, worth millions, was suddenly in jeopardy. I was just there to take notes, but Collins turned to me and said, "You've read the briefs. You know the terms. Handle it." My heart nearly stopped. I walked into that meeting room with my pulse thundering, facing people twice my age and with decades more experience. I clung to the facts, the research I'd memorized, and leaned on the storytelling I'd used in that first big presentation. Hours later, the deal was signed. When we stepped out, Collins said nothing, just clapped me on the shoulder. The gesture said more than words could. Over the years, my responsibilities grew. I moved from assistant to analyst to project manager. Each role brought new challenges, tight deadlines, impossible clients, and moments where I questioned if I was in over my head. But each time I stumbled, Collins was there in his own quiet way, never rescuing me outright, but always leaving a breadcrumb of guidance. It was never about him doing it for me. It was about him making sure I learned how to do it myself. I began to understand that leadership wasn't about knowing everything. It was about making others believe they could. One winter, the company faced its darkest hour. A failed product launch had drained resources, and competitors were circling like sharks. Collins gathered the leadership team and asked for solutions. One by one, they offered safe, cautious ideas, none of which could save us. My hands were sweating, but I spoke up. I pitched a bold, almost reckless plan to pivot into a new market. The room went silent. "That's risky," one director scoffed. Collins looked at me, and for a moment I thought he'd shut it down. Instead, he said, "Let's hear more." Over the next weeks, I led the project. It was brutal, sleepless nights, constant setbacks, but the gamble paid off. We didn't just recover, we thrived. My promotion to vice president came quietly. No ceremony, no big announcement. Just a folded letter on my desk with Collins' signature at the bottom. But with it came weight, decisions that affected hundreds of employees, pressure that didn't let up. I learned quickly that power wasn't glamorous. It was responsibility, accountability, and the constant awareness that every choice could be the one that defined you, for better or worse. The day Collins called me into his office for the last time as my boss felt surreal. He looked older, his hair almost entirely silver now. "I'm stepping down," he said simply. My chest tightened. "And I want you to take my place." For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was the man who had hired me when I had nothing, who had thrown me into the fire again and again until I learned to walk through it without burning. And now, he was handing me the keys to the kingdom. "Why me?" I finally asked. He smiled faintly. "Because you earned it." Walking into that office as CEO, I thought of that first day, the worn shoes, the fear, the man who saw something in me before I saw it in myself. I knew then my job wasn't just to lead the company. It was to find the next scared kid in the lobby, and give them the same 4 words that had changed my life: "You start on Monday." My first day as CEO felt heavier than I expected. The desk was the same one Collins had used, but it didn't feel like mine. The walls seemed to echo with his presence. I kept half expecting him to walk in and give me that subtle nod of approval. Instead, the silence reminded me that this was now my responsibility alone. I didn't inherit just a title. I inherited the trust of every person who came to work here. And I knew I had to earn it all over again, just like the first time I'd walked through those doors. The company was in a moment of growth, but also vulnerability. New competitors were emerging, technology was evolving faster than we could adapt, and our own success had made us a target. I gathered my leadership team and told them plainly, "We don't survive by playing it safe. We survive by being bold but smart." Some of them looked uncertain. Change always scares people, but I remembered how Collins had trusted me with risks no one else would take. Now, it was my turn to do the same. One of my first challenges came from within. A senior executive, someone with decades at the company, openly questioned my strategies in a meeting. His voice carried the kind of authority that could sway others. I could feel the tension in the room, everyone waiting to see how I would respond. My instinct was to defend myself, but instead, I asked him to present his plan in detail. We spent hours dissecting both approaches. In the end, mine stood, but I made sure his contributions shaped it. I learned that day that leadership wasn't about winning arguments. It was about building something stronger from the clash of ideas. Months passed, and I found myself in situations Collins had warned me about, moments where the easy choice looked tempting but wasn't right. A lucrative deal with questionable partners. A cost-cutting measure that would have saved millions but put hundreds out of work. Each time, I remembered the lessons he never spoken directly but had lived by: people before profit, integrity before convenience. Sometimes it cost us in the short term, but the long-term trust it built was worth more than any quarterly report. The weight of the job wasn't just in business decisions, it was in the human ones. I learned the names of employees far beyond the boardroom. I walked the factory floors, visited the call centers, sat with interns at lunch. I wanted them to know I saw them, the same way Collins had seen me. And slowly, the walls of that office began to feel less like his and more like mine. One afternoon, I received an email from a young applicant. His resume was short, his experience minimal, but something in his cover letter caught my attention, a tone of hunger, a quiet determination that felt strangely familiar. I called him in for an interview. When he arrived, he looked nervous, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, holding his documents like they might slip away. I asked him questions, listened to his story, and then, without planning it, I heard myself say the same 4 words Collins had told me. "You start on Monday." His eyes widened, and in that moment, I understood exactly what Collins must have felt the day he hired me. But life has a way of testing you even when you think you've arrived. A sudden market crash hit us hard. Investors panicked, departments scrambled, and for the first time in years, I felt that same fear I'd carried as a junior assistant. The difference now was that the weight of hundreds of families depended on my decisions. I worked days that bled into nights, barely sleeping, poring over contingency plans with my team. And then, in the middle of the chaos, I got a call I never wanted to receive. Collins had passed away. I attended his funeral quietly, standing toward the back, watching the faces of those who had known him far longer than I had. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about his accomplishments or titles. I told them about the day he hired me, how he had looked past what I lacked and saw what I could become. I told them those 4 words had changed my life. And I promised to carry them forward. After the crisis passed, and we survived stronger than before, I found myself in my office late at night, the city lights glittering through the window. I thought about the path from that corner desk by the copier to this chair, about the risks, the failures, the small victories no one saw. And I realized something. My story wasn't about becoming CEO. It was about never forgetting the climb. Today, when I look at this company, I don't just see numbers or market share. I see people, each one carrying their own story, their own quiet battles. I know I can't change every life. But maybe, just maybe, I can change one at a time. The way Collins changed mine. And so, the legacy continues. Somewhere out there, another nervous kid is walking into a lobby, clutching a resume, wondering if they belong. And maybe one day, they'll sit where I am now, telling their own story, remembering the moment it all began with a simple, life-altering sentence: "You start on Monday." Sometimes, the biggest opportunities in life don't come wrapped in grand gestures or shining titles. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, in a hallway, in a single sentence, in someone deciding to believe in you when no one else will. My journey from a worn pair of shoes in a crowded lobby to the CEO's chair wasn't about luck alone. It was about the moments when I could have quit but didn't, the people who could have looked away but didn't, and the belief that hard work has a way of turning invisible potential into undeniable reality. We often wait for the right time, the perfect skills, the ideal conditions to chase something bigger. But the truth is, most of us start unprepared. I certainly did. What makes the difference isn't knowing everything on day one. It's showing up, again and again, ready to learn, ready to work, ready to prove that the faith someone placed in you wasn't misplaced. And here's the part we can't forget: success is never just yours. It's built on the shoulders of those who gave you a chance, those who pushed you when you wanted to stop, those who saw your best even on your worst days. The real measure of achievement isn't reaching the top, it's what you do when you get there. Will you guard the door, or will you open it for someone else? I was given 4 words that changed my life. You start on Monday. They weren't just an offer of employment, they were a statement of belief, a spark that lit everything that came after. And now, I've learned that the greatest reward of all is getting to pass that spark on. So maybe today, you're not in the position you dream of. Maybe you feel unseen, underestimated, or stuck. Remember this: one yes can change everything, but sometimes you have to be the one who gives it, to yourself, or to someone else. Opportunities multiply when we create them for each other. Because one day, years from now, someone might tell their own story. And when they reach the part about how it all began, maybe it will start with something you said, something you did, some small act of belief that set their life in motion.